The Vatican City, rich in history and priceless artifacts, with a staggering net worth of over $265.62 billion. But how did they go from being the most persecuted religion in the world to the richest in the world? And how did a desolate marshy area on the west bank of the Tiber become one of the most powerful and wealthiest places on earth? This isn't your average rags to riches story. This is the story of how and where the Vatican, the most holy city in the world, got its mind-boggling wealth. It wasn't just from the collection boxes, as you might expect, but from unholy means that would surely make your head spin. From what Pope Leo X did in the 1500s for money, to their mafia connection in the late 1900s. You are about to enter the rabbit hole of the Vatican's finances, which would leave you questioning everything, including their holiness. Don't miss a second. It began with Emperor Constantine in the year 313 AD. Christianity was still young, its followers persecuted. Constantine, the ruler of the Western Roman Empire, and Licinius, who was the ruler of the Eastern Roman Empire, decided that it was time to give Christians freedom. So they legalized Christianity through the Edict of Milan. But it was also during this time that Constantine and his mother Helena began showering the church with land and money. But here is the twist. Some of these lands donated to the church belonged to a Roman noble family known as the Lateran family. This family's estate was seized by Emperor Nero after a conspiracy involving Plautius Lateranus. Emperor Constantine then later acquired it, likely through his wife Fausta, and donated it to the Pope around 313 AD after the Edict of Milan. That was how the Lateran estate became not just a property of the Catholic Church, but the site of the Archbasilica of St. John Lateran and the Lateran Palace. This palace first served as the papal residence for nearly 1,000 years. But today it houses the Vatican Historical Museum and church offices. By the fall of the Roman Empire, land was the ultimate currency, and patrician families were facing political instability. The patricians were Rome's ruling elite, aristocratic families who held political power and seats in the Senate. They thought of ways to protect their estates from confiscation by rival rulers, and the church came to their minds. So, they made land donations to the church. These were not small plots. Whole farmlands in Sicily, vineyards in Gaul, towns in northern Italy. Every donation meant the church wasn't just saving souls, it was becoming one of the largest landowners in Europe. But these were not the real jackpots. By 756 AD, a Frankish king called Pepin the Short defeated the Lombards in Italy. He also conquered large acres of land from them. But instead of using it or holding on to it, he gifted huge territories to the Pope in what became known as the Donation of Pepin. Why did he make this donation? The Pope had legitimized Pepin's rule with a sacred anointing. It was at this moment that the Catholic Church hit the real jackpot. This gift gave the papacy both spiritual authority and political power over central Italy. They weren't gifted mere lands. Those lands were the bedrock of what would become the Papal States, a kingdom within a kingdom in Italy, and the Vatican's first true source of revenue. The Papal States, a territory in central Italy, was ruled by the Pope. At this time, the Church became a sovereign state, collecting taxes, rents, and tributes from millions of people. This continued till 1870, when the Papal States stopped to exist due to the unification of Italy. But the Church still owns properties in Italy till date. But managing wealth across a chaotic medieval Europe required muscle and money handlers. So, the Knights Templar was formed. At first, they were meant to protect Christian pilgrims traveling. They were known for their military prowess, but by the 12th century, these warrior monks became the papal bankers of Christendom. They protected treasure, moved funds between kingdoms, and collected papal taxes. When kings owed Rome, The Templars were the enforcers, and their power grew so vast it frightened kings themselves. Eventually, the Knights Templar was accused of heresy and disbanded by the Pope under pressure from the then French king. Convenient, right? By the 13th century, Pope Clement V took over, but the papacy was facing political chaos in Rome, and Philip IV, a French king, wanted a pope who was politically loyal, financially cooperative, and easier to influence. So he pushed Clement V to leave Rome for Avignon. Pope Clement V moved the papal court to Avignon, starting the Avignon papacy that lasted nearly 70 years. But as the papacy shifted to Avignon, the church needed professional bankers. That's when Italian merchant dynasties like the Peruzzi and Bardi families stepped in. They became the Mercatores Camerae Apostolicae, the official collectors of papal taxes. These Florentine and Sienese houses didn't just move money, they built a system. The Apostolic Camera, Rome's treasury office, outsourced its operations to them. Tithes from England, France, and Spain flowed through their hands. For a time, the Vatican was plugged into the arteries of international trade. But when the great Florentine banks collapsed in the 1340s, the papacy itself staggered. You would think this should be enough, right? Well, by the Renaissance period, when banking was booming, the Vatican's projects, especially the rebuilding of St. Peter's Basilica, required sums of money that only Europe's banking dynasties could provide. That was how Jakob Fugger of Augsburg and the Medici family of Florence came into the picture. The Medici family produced not one, but 4 popes: Pope Leo X, Pope Clement VII, Pope Pius IV, and Pope Leo XI, all members of this Italian family. So it wasn't hard for them to funnel both cash and influence into the Vatican. But before they fully came into the picture, Jakob Fugger of Augsburg was a major German banker and one of the Vatican's most important financiers. As early as 1473, Jakob Fugger of Augsburg's family had clerics in Rome handling church affairs, and by 1477 they were already transferring church revenues from Sweden to Rome. By the early 1500s, he was loaning the church massive sums in exchange for control over lucrative mining rights and political favors. The money he loaned the church was used to build the new St. Peter's Basilica, the Sistine Chapel, and other Vatican projects. But to repay Jakob Fugger of Augsburg, Pope Leo X had to use desperate measures. Pope Leo imposed heavy taxes on the German people and authorized the sale of indulgences. What are indulgences? Well, they were some kind of certificates said to reduce time in purgatory. How? Confessing your sins wasn't enough. You pay for forgiveness. The issue was that indulgences weren't just preached as charity, they were marketed like a business deal. Some preachers like Archbishop Albrecht of Mainz even promised, as soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs. This wasn't unexpected from people like Albrecht of Mainz, who was said to have bought his archbishopric with money borrowed from Jakob Fugger of Augsburg. But people saw through it. Selling indulgences wasn't spirituality, it was a cash machine. This practice became scandalous as people saw it as the church selling salvation. It also enraged many monks, including Martin Luther, who would go on to write his 95 Theses, a spark that lit the Protestant Reformation. But Jakob Fugger of Augsburg's ties to Rome only deepened. After Pope Alexander VI died in 1503, Fugger moved quickly to secure favor with the next popes. For Pope Julius II, he even financed the recruitment of the Swiss Guard in 1506, an elite force that still protects the Vatican till today. But Fugger's role didn't stop there. Between 1508 and 1524, Jakob Fugger of Augsburg's family even leased the Roman mint, producing 66 different coin types for 4 popes. Their dominance in Rome eventually weakened after the 1527 sack of Rome and the rise of the Medici Pope, Clement VII, who leaned away from German bankers and leaned towards his families. The Medici family used their bank to handle church money, give loans, and fund big papal projects. They mixed banking, politics, and art to grow both Vatican wealth and their own power. This family shaped how the Catholic Church earned, collected, and spent their money. But no one symbolized the Renaissance era more than Agostino Chigi, nicknamed Il Magnifico. He was also a banker to Popes Julius II and Leo X. He controlled papal revenues, funded wars, and commissioned palaces that dazzled Europe. If you wanted papal favor, you went through Chigi. Even after the Protestant Reformation shattered Christendom, the Vatican's need for bankers only grew. Roman families like the Torlonia dynasty rose as the Pope's bankers, amassing fortunes by managing papal finances. And then came the most famous bankers of them all, the Rothschilds. In the 1830s, as the Papal States teetered on the brink of financial collapse, the Rothschild family provided two major loans to the Vatican to stabilize the Papal States' finances. The first loan was in 1832 under Pope Gregory XVI, and the second in the 1850s under Pope Pius IX. They helped the Church recover after wars and political upheaval. These loans made the Rothschilds the Vatican's key bankers, though their involvement drew criticism over perceived Jewish influence. But for that moment, the Pope and the banker were bound together by necessity. But even more money was about to hit the Church's account. Years later, the Vatican got a windfall. It became their modern fortune, and it began with a treaty. In 1929, Mussolini's Italy signed the Lateran Pact. The Lateran Treaty was an agreement between the Kingdom of Italy and the Holy See, the governing authority of the Catholic Church, that formally recognized Vatican City as an independent state and settled the long-standing dispute known as the Roman Question. However, this pact contained three agreements: a treaty establishing Vatican City as an independent state, a concordat on church-state relations, and a financial convention compensating the Church for the loss of the Papal States. The payout, 750 million lire in cash and 1 billion lire in bonds. As impressive as that sounds, it was nothing but a seed in the hands of one man, Bernardino Nogara. At that time, he was the man tasked to manage the compensation the Church received. Bernardino was no ordinary accountant. He was a visionary financier. Given total freedom, he invested across Europe, setting up Swiss holding companies and London property firms. He bought real estate, utilities, insurance companies. From his strategies, the Vatican became not just a spiritual empire, but a financial powerhouse. Then came shadows. In 1942, the Institute for Religious Works, IOR, the Vatican Bank, was born. It became the Church's financial hub, but also a magnet for scandal. In the 1970s, the Vatican's banking ties to Michele Sindona, a mafia-linked financier, turned poisonous. How did that happen? Michele Sindona, a banker with mafia ties, began handling Vatican funds under Pope Paul VI in the 1960s. By the 1970s, his risky and illegal schemes using church money led to his collapse and conviction, exposing the Vatican to scandal and criminal associations. Then came Roberto Calvi of Banco Ambrosiano. The press called him Banchier di Dio, meaning God's banker. This was because of how close he was to the Holy See. But he laundered Vatican money through secret companies. In 1982, Calvi was found hanging under Blackfriars Bridge in London, bricks stuffed in his pockets. Murder or message? The Vatican's name was everywhere in the headlines. These scandals forced change. By the 2000s, regulators froze Vatican accounts. Major banks like JP Morgan shut Vatican transactions, and transparency became unavoidable. The Holy See began hiring mainstream asset managers and auditors. But even now, secrecy lingers. The Vatican owns vast properties in London, Paris, and beyond, many held through quiet companies seeded by Nogara's investments. Today, the Vatican's art is priceless, its investments global, and its exact wealth still unknown. Some say it's one of the largest hidden fortunes in history. But if you ask exactly how much they have, you'll get a smile and silence. Because in the Vatican, some treasures are meant to be kept secret,